A warning to our viewers. What you're about to watch is a true story. The following program contains content that some viewers may find deeply disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The camera shakes violently as it descends rotting basement stairs into absolute darkness. A flashlight beam cuts through the void, searching, until it finally settles on something that will haunt hardened police officers for the rest of their lives. We've got a body. Female child. Basement. The small, lifeless form of a 5-year-old girl lies discarded on cold concrete, her tiny body showing signs of torture, so severe that jurors would later weep openly in court. But here's what makes this case different from any other you've heard. Here's what transforms this from a tragedy into something that defies human comprehension. Kamarie Holland wasn't abducted by a stranger. She wasn't taken in the night by some random predator. She was sold, traded, negotiated like merchandise by the one person meant to protect her above all others, her own mother. The price? $2,500. That was the opening bid for 1 hour with a kindergarten-age child. Before we go any further, if you're watching this, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel covers the cases that expose the darkest corners of human nature, the ones that force us to confront uncomfortable truths about the systems designed to protect our most vulnerable. Drop a like, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and stay with us because this story gets darker than you can possibly imagine. December 13th, 2021. Less than 24 hours after Camry disappeared, police body cameras captured the moment that would break an entire community. But the true horror wasn't just what happened in that abandoned basement in Phenix City, Alabama. It was a web of depravity, the calculated transactions, the system failures that led a bright, smiling 5-year-old girl into the hands of a monster her mother knew all too well. This is the story of Kamarie Holland. This is the Shadow Files crime series. And I promise you, by the end of this documentary, you'll understand why Sheriff Heath Taylor called this case another type of evil that society just doesn't need walking around. Let me take you back to November 23rd, 2016. Columbus, Georgia. A baby girl was born who would bring joy to everyone who met her. Kamarie Holland came into this world with a smile that, according to her first cousin, never seemed to fade. Her father, Kamarie Holland Sr., searched for words to describe his daughter after her death. The one that kept coming back, the one that appeared in every news article, every court statement, was precious. She was precious. It's a father's recognition that his daughter's worth was immeasurable, her life invaluable, a stark, devastating contrast to the price tag her mother would eventually place on her innocence. Camry was part of a large blended family, 8 children total, 4 brothers and 3 sisters. Her parents had separated when she was still a toddler, beginning a complicated custody arrangement that would prove fatal. Despite concerns about her mother's lifestyle, Kristy Siple maintained primary physical custody of Camry. And that decision, made in some family courtroom by people who couldn't possibly have known what was coming, sealed a 5-year-old's fate. But let's talk about what Camry was like before the darkness consumed her short life. This wasn't just another case number, another victim in a file. This was a real child with dreams and favorite songs and a laugh that could dissolve tension in any classroom. Teachers noted her enthusiasm for learning, her eagerness to make friends. She was learning to write her name, to count beyond 20, to recognize simple words. At 5 years old, she was just beginning her educational journey. Her family had dreams for her, dreams of college, of opportunities they themselves might never have had. In the photograph that survived her, that same bright smile appears again and again, genuine, uninhibited, full of the innocent joy that defines childhood. There's one photo in particular, the last known image of Kamarie Holland alive, taken in early December 2021. Within days of that photograph being captured, she would be gone, her future erased by the very people meant to safeguard it. But behind that smile, behind those bright eyes and that infectious laugh, lay a fractured family dynamic that was quietly, methodically placing Camry in danger. And the warning signs? They were everywhere. Neighbors would later tell investigators about the constant stream of visitors to Kristy Siple's home, the revolving door of adults coming and going at odd hours. Court records revealed that Siple had been on the radar of child welfare authorities before. Russell County Sheriff Heath Taylor confirmed there had been previous concerns about Siple's parenting. But somehow, through gaps in the system, through jurisdictional boundaries that don't communicate, through overworked caseworkers and sealed family court files, Camry slipped through every safety net. Now, let me introduce you to the monster who was waiting on the other side of those failed systems. Jeremy Tremaine Williams, born in Alabama in 1984. By the time he crossed paths with Kamarie Holland, he had spent nearly 4 decades cultivating a pattern of behavior that should have set off alarm bells in every community he entered. 2009, Phenix City, Alabama. Williams faced his first formal charges of child abuse. For 3 years, he moved through the justice system, and then in 2012, a jury acquitted him. But that wasn't his first encounter with suspicion. Not even close. January 2005, North Pole, Alaska, more than 4,000 miles away from where Camry would eventually die. Williams' 1-month-old daughter, Nia Trennis Williams, died under circumstances that raised immediate questions. Alaska authorities found the infant had suffered blunt force trauma. They listed her manner of death as undetermined. Williams refused to submit to polygraph tests, refused police interviews. The case went cold but was never forgotten. Think about that for a moment. A dead infant, blunt force trauma, a father who refuses to cooperate. And then he walks away, moves back to Alabama, lives his life, meets new women, specifically targets single mothers with young daughters, and nobody connects the dots. At Williams' sentencing in April 2024, a 23-year-old woman took the stand. Her voice was steady despite the weight of her words. She looked directly at the man who had stolen her innocence and called him what he was, a monster. She described how Williams had molested her when she was just 4 years old, 2 decades earlier. Another crime that had never resulted in conviction. Another child who carried scars while Williams moved freely through society. Here's what the evidence would later reveal about Williams' methodology. He deliberately sought relationships with women who had young children, particularly daughters. He ingratiated himself with single mothers struggling financially, offering help that came with an unspoken price. He was meticulous in selecting locations where he could operate undetected. And when he eventually met Kristy Siple, he found something even more disturbing than a negligent parent. He found a willing partner. The abandoned house on 15th Avenue in Phenix City wasn't chosen at random. Williams had lived there previously. He knew its isolation. He understood that neighbors in that area had learned to look the other way. Like many predators, he was calculating, patient, careful, the perfect place to commit an unspeakable crime. And if you're still watching, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, do it now. Because what comes next reveals exactly how these two people, Williams and Siple, came together to orchestrate something so evil that veteran detectives would step outside courtrooms just to compose themselves. By December 2021, America was emerging from the shadow of lockdowns. Christmas was coming. In Columbus, Georgia, holiday lights illuminated homes where families gathered, grateful for moments of normalcy after nearly 2 years of pandemic uncertainty. Children were writing letters to Santa, counting down days on Advent calendars, dreaming about presents under the tree. In a small rental home on an unassuming Columbus street, 5-year-old Kamarie Holland should have been doing exactly that. Instead, her mother was making phone calls, not to arrange Christmas surprises, but to negotiate a price for her daughter's body. 12 minutes away, across the Chattahoochee River that separates Georgia from Alabama, Jeremy Williams waited. A 37-year-old man with a history known only to a few. A man once charged with child abuse. A man suspected in the death of his own infant daughter years before in Alaska. Now he was offering Kristy Siple $2,500 for 1 hour with her kindergarten-age daughter. Phone records would later show multiple calls between Siple and Williams throughout that evening. Calls that finalized a plan months in the making. Court documents would reveal the unthinkable details. Siple had agreed to allow Williams to have sexual contact with her 5-year-old daughter in exchange for money. Initially, the price was set at $2,500. but after negotiation, they settled on $1,300. A child's life, a child's innocence, haggled over and ultimately sold for less than the cost of a used appliance. Sunday, December 12th, 2021. That night, while Camry should have been safe in her bed, she was taken from her home. Investigators believe she was likely asleep when transported to the abandoned house in Phenix City. The same house where Williams had once lived, now empty and isolated from neighbors who might hear or witness what was about to occur. What happened inside that house was documented by Williams himself. Using his cell phone, he recorded his crimes against Camry, creating video evidence that would later be presented in court, causing jurors to weep as they viewed it. And here's where this case descends into a level of depravity that tests the limits of human comprehension. Toxicology reports confirm that Camry had been given methamphetamine before her death. Dr. David Rusk, the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy, testified that the child had both methamphetamine and amphetamine in her system, a deliberate attempt by Williams to sedate his victim, to make her compliant, to rob her of even the ability to fully understand what was happening to her. According to medical testimony, after hours of abuse, Williams ended Camry's life by strangulation. Dr. Rusk's clinical description in court was devastating. The cause of death was asphyxia due to ligature strangulation. Williams had used an object to cut off the oxygen to Camry's brain until she died. But even death did not end Camry's suffering. Forensic evidence proved that Williams continued to violate her body after she had died and filmed these acts as well. This evidence would lead to the additional charge of abuse of corpse, a charge that barely captures the monstrosity of desecrating a child body. Afterward, Williams took calculated steps to conceal evidence. He locked the abandoned house, discarded items that might contain DNA evidence, and returned to his current residence acting as though nothing had happened. Like many predators, he showed a chilling ability to compartmentalize his actions. Meanwhile, Kristy Siple waited until morning to report her daughter missing. At approximately 6:15 a.m. on December 13th, she called the Columbus Police Department. Her voice carried what investigators would later describe as practice panic. She reported that her 5-year-old daughter was missing from their home on Bowman Street in Columbus, Georgia. She claimed she had last seen Camry when she put her to bed around midnight. According to her statement, she woke up at 5:50 a.m. to find her daughter's bed empty and the front door of their home standing open. The classic scenario of a child abduction by an intruder, a performance that would later horrify investigators once they learned the truth. Columbus police responded immediately. In cases of missing children, especially those suggesting abduction, the first hours are critical. Officers secured the scene, began interviewing Siple and other residents of the home, started canvassing the neighborhood. By mid-morning, the search had expanded dramatically. Police officers went door to door. K-9 units attempted to pick up Camry's scent. Local volunteers joined law enforcement to search nearby wooded areas, abandoned buildings, drainage ditches, anywhere a 5-year-old might be hidden. As the search intensified, Siple appeared before news cameras, playing the role of the devastated mother. She tearfully claimed Camry was the essence of her life, and that she couldn't process what happened to her daughter. It was a performance worthy of an award, except the stakes were a child's life and the actress was her killer. Behind the scenes, detectives were already uncovering inconsistencies in Siple's story. Her phone records revealed those multiple calls with Jeremy Williams in the hours before Camry disappeared. A crucial tip came from someone who recognized Williams' name and informed police about the abandoned house in Phenix City, where he had once lived. By late afternoon, the investigation had crossed state lines. Columbus police coordinated with Russell County Sheriff's Office in Alabama. A team that included Columbus Police Sergeant Jane Edenfield headed to the vacant house on 15th Avenue in Phenix City. After dark on the same day Camry was reported missing, officers entered the abandoned house. And in the basement, they made the discovery they had feared. Sergeant Edenfield was one of the first to see Camry's small body, showing clear signs of trauma and assault. At 11:15 p.m., less than 18 hours after Camry had been reported missing, what began as a desperate search for a missing child officially became a homicide investigation. 2 jurisdictions, 2 states, 1 horrific discovery, and at the center of it all, a 5-year-old girl betrayed by the very person meant to protect her from monsters. Within hours of discovering Camry's body, law enforcement had already identified their primary suspect. Jeremy Williams' connection to the abandoned house was well established. He had previously lived there, and witnesses had seen his vehicle in the area on the night of December 12th. By dawn on December 14th, less than 30 hours after Camry was reported missing, Russell County Sheriff's deputies located Williams at a hotel in Phenix City. The arrest was swift and without incident, a quiet end to the first chapter of what would become an increasingly disturbing investigation. When investigators examined Williams' cell phone, they discovered evidence more damning than they could have imagined. Williams had meticulously documented his crimes, recording videos of the sexual assault both before and after Camry's death. He had created his own evidence, his own record of depravity, perhaps for future viewing or perhaps to share with others in the dark corners of the internet where such monsters congregate. For 2 weeks, investigators built their case methodically, tracking every communication between Siple and Williams, interviewing witnesses who had seen them together, corroborating evidence from both Georgia and Alabama. What emerged was a conspiracy more horrific than anyone had initially imagined. On December 28, 2021, 15 days after her daughter's murder, Kristy Siple was arrested at her home in Columbus. Initially charged with failure to report a missing child, prosecutors would soon add more serious charges: felony murder, human trafficking. The woman who had appeared on television begging for her daughter's safe return was now facing the possibility of the death penalty. In March 2022, a Russell County grand jury formally indicted both Jeremy Williams and Kristy Siple. The charges reflected the full horror of what had happened to Kamarie Holland. Williams faced 8 charges in total, including 4 counts of capital murder, each representing a different aspect of his crime: murder of a child under 14, murder during a kidnapping, murder during a rape, murder during sodomy. Any one of these charges alone could result in the death penalty in Alabama. Beyond the murder charges, Williams was indicted for human trafficking, production of obscene material involving a child, and abuse of corpse. That last charge stemming from his continued violation of Camry's body after her death. Kristy Siple's charges were similarly severe: 3 counts of felony murder and 2 counts of sex trafficking. As the person who had delivered her daughter to a known predator, she too faced the possibility of the death penalty. While awaiting trial, Williams's behavior raised concerns. Prison officials placed him on suicide watch for nearly 10 months after he attempted to hang himself with cloth in his cell. In December 2022, he filed a motion to be removed from suicide watch, which a judge denied. On March 13, 2024, in a surprising move, Jeremy Williams pleaded guilty to multiple counts of capital murder, rape, and other offenses. When asked by the judge why he would plead guilty knowing he faced a death penalty, Williams simply stated he wanted to expedite the process. No remorse, no explanation, just a desire to move things along. On the same day Williams pleaded guilty, Kristy Siple made a different choice. She accepted a plea deal. Prosecutors dropped the murder charges, and she pleaded guilty to sex trafficking, facing up to 20 years in prison instead of death, a deal that would outrage Camry's family and many in the community, who believed she deserved the same fate as Williams. On April 8, 2024, more than 2 years after Camry's murder, jury selection began for Williams' trial. Despite his guilty plea, Alabama law required Williams to undergo a jury trial to determine his guilt before sentencing. The law recognizes the gravity of capital punishment and ensures that even with confession, evidence must still be presented and evaluated by a jury. The judge warned potential jurors about the disturbing nature of the evidence they would see, a necessary but insufficient preparation for what was to come. On the first day of trial, prosecutors presented the video evidence Williams had recorded on his phone. The reaction in the courtroom was immediate and visceral. Several jurors openly wept. Others looked away. One asked for a brief recess to compose herself. Forensic pathologist Dr. David Rusk provided clinical testimony that nonetheless painted a horrific picture. He confirmed Camry died from asphyxia due to ligature strangulation and detailed the extensive trauma to her body. He also testified about the methamphetamine found in her system, explaining how the drug would have affected a child of her size. The emotional weight of the evidence affected everyone in the courtroom. Veteran police officers stepped outside during breaks, visibly shaken. Court reporters paused to collect themselves. Even the judge occasionally removed his glasses to wipe his eyes. After just 3 days of gut-wrenching testimony, on April 12, 2024, the jury reached their verdict. Jeremy Williams was found guilty on all counts. For counts of capital murder plus sodomy, sexual abuse of a child under 12, production of obscene material involving a child, human trafficking, conspiracy to commit human trafficking, and abuse of a corpse. After the verdict, Camry's father told reporters the judgment was well-deserved and urged the court to impose a death penalty. Camry was too precious for what happened to her, he said, his voice breaking with emotion. His life compares nothing to Camry's. Camry's grandmother addressed the devastating permanence of what Williams had done. In a stunning moment, Williams's ex-wife took the stand, looking directly at the man she had once been married to, and delivered a searing assessment. Perhaps most powerful was the testimony of that 23-year-old woman who had been molested by Williams when she was just 4 years old, a crime for which he had never been convicted. Now an adult, she confronted the man who had abused her 2 decades earlier, calling him the monster he truly was. After hearing all impact statements, Judge David Johnson delivered his sentence. For each of the 4 capital murder convictions, Williams would receive the death penalty. Additionally, he sentenced Williams to life in prison for both production of obscene material of a child and human trafficking, 20 years for conspiracy to commit human trafficking, and 10 years for abuse of a corpse. As he was led from the courtroom for the final time in the 6-day trial, reporters repeatedly asked Williams why he did what he did to Camry. He never answered the question. Not once, because monsters rarely explain themselves. 3 months later, on July 18, 2024, Kristy Siple received her sentence. Having pleaded guilty to sex trafficking, she was given 20 years in prison, a $10,000 fine, and a requirement to register as a sex offender upon her release. Her sentence was backdated to the start of her pre-trial imprisonment. For Kamarie Holland Sr., the sentence brought a measure of justice, if not peace. His daughter's killer would never walk free again. But no punishment, however severe, could bring back the 5-year-old girl with a bright smile who had barely begun to live. Within hours of sentencing, Williams was transported to Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama, home to the state's death row. He became the 166th inmate awaiting execution in Alabama. But as with all death sentences, a lengthy appeals process began automatically. The bitter irony of capital punishment in America is that Williams's 4 death sentences may take decades to carry out, if they ever are. The longest-serving death row inmate in Alabama was sentenced in January 1982, more than 42 years ago. For Camry's family, closure through execution may remain elusive for the remainder of their lives. On December 22, 2021, just 9 days before Christmas, more than 200 mourners gathered to say goodbye to Kamarie Holland. The funeral service brought together family, friends, and even law enforcement officers who worked tirelessly on her case, including Sheriff Heath Taylor and District Attorney Rick Chancey. Amid the raw grief, Camry's great-uncle delivered words that resonated with everyone present. Evil has entered our community. Evil has affected our family. Yet amid the darkness, the community rallied to support Camry's father and siblings as they faced their first holiday without her. In the months that followed, the case sparked renewed conversation about child protection across both Georgia and Alabama. Law enforcement agencies in the region implemented enhanced protocols for cross-jurisdictional cooperation in missing children cases, recognizing that precious time had been lost navigating the bureaucracy of state lines. For the officers who found Camry and investigated her death, the case left indelible marks. Columbus Police Sergeant Jane Edenfield, who discovered Camry's body, later became an advocate for specialized trauma support for officers who work child homicide cases. For Kamarie Holland Sr., keeping Camry's memory alive became a mission. In April 2022, still processing his devastating loss, He spoke about the void left in his life. On November 23rd, 2024, on what would have been Camry's 8th birthday, Corey organized a celebration of her life. There were balloons, cake, and stories about the 5 short years she had lived. It wasn't just a memorial. It was a birthday party for a child who would never blow out her candles. Russell County District Attorney Rick Chancey, now 55, reflected on a case that had haunted his office for over 2 years. Chancey later revealed he had visited Camry's grave, a quiet moment of reflection after years of pursuing justice for her. In the aftermath of the case, child welfare agencies in both Alabama and Georgia reviewed the procedures for identifying at-risk children. New training protocols emphasize recognizing the warning signs of trafficking by family members, situations previously considered so unthinkable they weren't adequately addressed in existing guidelines. An Alaska detective who had investigated Naya's death in 2005 spoke with reporters after Williams' conviction. "If we had been able to make that case back then," he said, "Kamarie Holland might still be alive today." It's a haunting reminder of how failures in one part of the system can have deadly consequences years later, thousands of miles away. Today, when you ask those who knew Camry what they remember most, the answer is always the same. Her smile, that bright, genuine smile that appears in photograph after photograph. The smile of a 5-year-old girl who deserved birthday parties, graduations, a first day of kindergarten, a first crush, a prom dress, a college acceptance letter, a wedding day, children of her own, a lifetime of possibilities. Instead, Kamarie Holland rests in Sunset Memorial Gardens while the man who took her life sits on death row and the woman who sold her serves 20 years in prison. As Russell County District Attorney Rick Chancey said, "There's no reason that baby should be in the ground." For Camry, justice came too late. The warning signs were everywhere. A predator with a dead infant daughter in Alaska, prior child abuse charges, a mother with a history of concerning behavior, a system fragmented by jurisdictional boundaries, a society that still struggles to believe mothers could do such things to their own children. The question remains, how many more children must suffer before we learn to recognize the warning signs? How many more Camrys are out there right now, in homes where danger doesn't come from strangers, but from the people who should protect them? If this story affected you, if it made you angry, if it made you want to do something, then subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications. Share this video. Because these stories need to be told. These children need to be remembered. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone sees the warning signs, they'll act before it's too late. This has been the Shadow Files Crime Series. Thank you for watching. And remember Kamarie Holland. Remember her smile.